knowing, if you don't mind, please raise a hand. Wonderful. Welcome, folks. We're glad you're here with us this morning. You know, we are about to greet each other, so I want to offer up a special thanks to the introverts among us, for whom this may not be the easiest thing to do. Do you see at 6 a.m. preparing to turn and greet my neighbor? 6 a.m. And then, like, just right there, turn and greet my neighbor. It's going to happen in one moment. And then recovering from turn and greet my neighbor. That's going to take you up to 1 o'clock or something. So I don't know. So thank you, introverts, for joining us in our greeting time. Let's do that right now, and we will move on to the next segment at the sounding of the bowl. So let's greet each other right now. Once another's, we mourn the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all.
Good morning. Gee, I haven't even said anything offensive yet, huh? I am Vicki Warden and a co-chair of our Ways and Means Council, a job I share with our finance manager, Suhanna Karras. I think you all know Suhanna, and the two of us chair the Ways and Means Council. Each year, the councils select an organization for our Sunday support. We want an organization that supports our specific council missions and values. And this year, our council, Suhanna's council, the one that we chair, we have selected an organization you very probably haven't heard of called Cleveland Owns, O-W-N-S. And our church has worked with Cleveland Owns now for 4 years. Among the many facets of Cleveland Owns are the co-op purchasing programs, and we have participated in them, and they have saved us literally hundreds of dollars through the work of this organization. For instance, we saved money on a new copier lease, on waste hauling, on our electric bill, and our gas bill. And those are just the ones that we've been involved in that Cleveland Owns has put together for all of Cleveland for nonprofit organizations. And as more opportunities become available, we will hopefully be able to join. But Cleveland Owns is much more than that. So we have today the Executive Director, Jonathan Welly, who will tell you about Cleveland Owns, who has a very specific and very interesting mission. I think more, we all found out about it. It appeals to us on even a broader level. They also have a track record, and we think you'll find it interesting. Jonathan?
Thank you, Vicki. Good morning. The other week, I was at a seminary, a retreat for Sabbath economics, which was a new term for me, but one that brings together the sanctuary, the seminary, the streets, and the soil, and asks us to take Jesus seriously when he says in the Bible that building the kingdom of God involves challenging power, involves challenging accumulations of wealth, and that is actually the active presence that God calls us to pursue in living his will in the world. And at Cleveland Owns, though we're a secular organization, that's a mission that we take seriously, and we are trying to build an alternative economic system grounded not on profit, but on people. Grounded on the principles of a solidarity economy and economic democracy. So we do that by starting cooperative enterprises, and one of those cooperative enterprises is Power Up Purchasing Co-op that Suhanna mentioned. About 36 congregations and nonprofits have come together to buy stuff in bulk, mostly the contracts like Suhanna mentioned. Suhanna mentioned earlier, but Vicki just mentioned a minute ago, excuse me. We understand that in racial capitalism, ownership confers power, and ownership confers the power to prosper. So until we have an equitable distribution of ownership, we believe we will continue to see the same inequalities in our region that we have today. So in addition to Power Up Purchasing Co-op, we are building 2 solar co-ops, a food co-op in the Central Kinsman neighborhood, and we are one of the groups that led Issue 38, which called for more economic democracy in how residents of the city of Cleveland get to make decisions over spending public money in their own neighborhoods through participatory budgeting. All that work is work that we can share more about in the foyer. Again, my name is Jonathan. We'd love to have a conversation. I'll be back with my colleague Craig to chat more about our work. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you all today and to celebrate this service with you. Thanks a lot.
I want to thank Jonathan, thank him for his organization, that not only do they save us money that we can use instead of paying for an electric bill, we can use it for programs that mean so much to so many of us. For those of you who would like to talk to Jonathan directly, as he mentioned, he will be in the rotunda after the service and would be glad to talk to you. Pick up a business card, pick up a brochure. There might be they do so many things. I think it's good to be aware of them. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
We love end-of-the-world disaster movies. Hollywood has envisioned many ways for the world to end. Planetary catastrophes, asteroids hitting the Earth, alien invasions and mutated monsters, computer uprisings, pandemics and plagues, zombie attacks, and of course, nuclear war. Most of these movies have heroes who survive and can repair the damage and pass the world on to future generations. The movies have a catastrophic middle, but then a relatively hopeful ending. The end-of-the-world scenario that dominated my childhood and many of yours was nuclear war. The Hollywood movies asked us to just make believe in asteroids, aliens, and zombies, but for nuclear war, we only needed to believe our own eyes. We saw a film of the atomic blasts in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought us as close as ever to full-scale nuclear war with Russia. I'm too young to remember these things firsthand, but they were taught in school. I watched the documentaries on PBS. I was in high school when Hollywood made a different kind of end-of-the-world movie. In 1983, ABC broadcast The Day After, starring Jason Robards, JoBeth Williams, John Lithgow, and Steve Guttenberg. Viewed by 100 million Americans, The Day After followed the usual disaster movie outline by first getting us acquainted with the main characters. While we got to know the characters, we saw warnings that a bad thing might be about to happen. Then the missiles launched, the atomic bombs detonated. Major cities were vaporized. Unlike most end-of-the-world movies, the ending is not hopeful. The characters we knew are either dead or doomed to die soon. Just before the ending credits roll, text came on the screen saying, "The film is fictional. The real-life outcome of nuclear war would be much worse." It was not a feel-good movie. The next day's newspaper comics page featured this from the popular comic strip Bloom County. It captures what I felt after seeing the movie, and I'll read these two panels to you. It's 6:14 a.m. The Day After was on TV last night. Evidently, watching the world torched by nuclear war has left our man here a bit shaken. "Oh, sir, may we have a brief comment on your feelings this morning? Sir, just a word?" When I'm worried about impending disaster on a national or global scale, I think about what the various recovery programs say. The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. Sometimes that means you have to hit bottom before you can bounce back up. Or, as UU minister Amy Carol Webb sings, when you're digging yourself into a hole, the bottom is the place where you choose to lay your shovel down. Sometimes people have to come to the precipice of disaster before they can back away from it. Maybe countries also need to reach the precipice of disaster before they find the will to back away. The Cuban Missile Crisis prompted the United States and the Soviet Union to install a White House to Kremlin phone hotline to facilitate better crisis communications. They also began negotiating nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation treaties. Ronald Reagan watched The Day After and wrote in his diary that the film was very effective and left me greatly depressed, and that it changed his mind on the prevailing policy on nuclear war. In 1987, Reagan and Gorbachev signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which resulted in reductions in their nuclear arsenals. It is infuriating and frightening and heartbreaking that people and nations can ignore the evidence of their own eyes and keep digging us into the very real holes of nuclear devastation, climate disaster, and political dystopia. When will they lay their shovels down? Until then, I'll leave you with the happier last panel of that Bloom County cartoon, which reminds us that as long as the sun comes up on our living grassy meadows, there is hope. Whew.
Let us now share deeply from the heart in our beloved ritual for all that is our lives. It's been ascribed to Plato, who said that be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Here we are in this space, and I invite you to look around. And what are the hard battles that we are bringing into this place? Joys too. We're all in different places. Some of us are happy, some of us are struggling, some of us are doing all of that and more. It's just to say, may the love of this community surround you and embrace you. I know that I will take these cards, which some folks have written their joys and concerns on. I'll take those into my prayers this week, but also the unspoken joys and unspoken sorrows that remain in our hearts. All of these I'll take into my meditations this week and pray for all that is our life. So in my home growing up, we had a glass top coffee table in the living room, and tucked away underneath it was the family Bible. I was 5 years old when I opened it out of curiosity. I mean, what was this huge book doing in the middle of the living room? In a place of pride, no less. Although, of course, I never saw anybody else read it. More to the point, would there be pictures? And there were pictures. This Bible happened to feature illustrations by the great French artist and engraver Gustave Doré. And I can still feel my sense of wonder from all those years ago. The creation of light, the Ten Commandments, scenes from Jesus' ministry, but especially the book of Revelation. That book, which is all about the apocalypse, the end of the world. Revelation chapter 6, verse 8, "And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed after him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with the sword, to kill with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth." Take a look at that. Do you see it? War between good and evil breaks out, and not just on earth, in heaven too. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 and 8. "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and the angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven." The dragon loses. And finally, the end of the world comes with the last judgment. The cosmic battle between good and evil comes to a close, and God sets to right all that's been wrong. I need to say that pictures like this triggered something in me. They triggered me. I was only 5, but I think I got what those pictures were trying to say. That vast and unthinkable forces were at work in this world. Calamity can come, but calamity need not be the last word. Total positive transformation can take place. As the writer Richard Bach once said, "What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly." Yeah. I was so carried away by this scenario of the apocalypse that one day while I was out playing, my mother was definitely not a helicopter parent, okay? So one day while I was out playing, I looked up at the sky. It was full of clouds, and it looked like right out of a Gustave Doré illustration, specifically the one entitled "The Last Judgment," in which there are tiers of clouds, and God and Jesus are at the top, angels are flying down from above, and great rivers of souls are streaming upwards to heaven and downwards to hell. That thing. So those clouds in my real world Peace River sky, for some reason they reminded me of the clouds in that Gustave Doré picture. And then for an instant, impossibly, I saw those two pictures merge and become as one. The last judgment happening right now. God, angels flying and souls streaming, and God and Jesus above it all right now in Peace River, Alberta, Canada. In my Peace River, Alberta sky. All there. But then I blinked, and in that exact moment, it all went away. It all went away. Nothing had happened. And everything. Ever since I have wondered about that moment, overheated imagination, hallucination, nothing remotely like that has ever happened since. Although I will have to say that I did hallucinate that the Browns would go all the way this year to the Super Bowl. So, but I come away from all of it with a sincere appreciation of something that the great mythologist Joseph Campbell once had to say. That great mythologist, comparative mythologist. He said, "Mythology is no toy for children, nor is it a matter of something archaic, something of merely scholarly concern, of no moment to modern people, of action. For its symbols," he says, "for its symbols, they touch and release the deepest centers of human motivation, moving the literate and illiterate alike, moving mobs, moving civilizations. All the gods," says Joseph Campbell, "all the heavens, all the hells are within you." Oh, and my first lesson in this came from a family Bible tucked away underneath that glass-topped coffee table when I was just 5. But the point is that it's not going to stay tucked away. It's not going to stay tucked away. That is the point. The end of the world myth of the apocalypse is not a myth in the sense of being false, but rather in the sense of expressing how humans are hardwired to experience the world. Humans are hardwired to yearn for total transformation. All the terror of the caterpillar is in that, and so is all the triumph of the butterfly. The myth of that is in our spiritual DNA. That is why we are triggered again and again in so many ways by this end of the world apocalypse myth. So it is, I think, time to reacquaint ourselves with this myth that is still very much alive in us. And when it gets triggered, how can we best respond? So I want to start with the observation that the myth of the apocalypse, it's found worldwide. It is found worldwide. It is definitely not restricted to the Christian Bible. In the Buddhist tradition, for example, we have a version of the end times that envisions people as acting in increasingly bad ways. Now this comes from the Chakabhati Sutra, excuse me. So according to this sutra, there was a golden age in which people were fully wise and pure, and lifetimes back then would span into something crazy like 80,000 years long. Okay, that's what the myth says. That was the golden age in which people were wise and pure, but then that golden age gave way to successively more and more degraded ages. People less wise, less pure, until we are where we are now, where people's general lifetime life spans up to 80 plus years or so. And the sutra goes on to say that it's just going to continue to get worse. The sutra predicts that humanity will degrade even further. Civilization will utterly disappear. Violence will reign. Life will be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, short. Now, a few people will escape this carnage, goes the myth. And when the slaughter is over, they'll come out of hiding, and they're going to resolve to reverse the course of things. And they're going to make a new start for humanity and slowly recover the loss of all the wisdom and the loss of all the ethics, all those things that have been lost over the ages. And the myth ends with human lifespans gradually increasing until they return to what they had once been in the original golden age, 80,000 years long. This is Buddhism's own end-time myth. Did you know that Buddhism had an end-time myth? How many of you knew that? Yeah, okay, that's for the extra scholars out there. But most people wouldn't know that. They would not know that. And it's just as with the Christian myth. All the terror of the caterpillar, all the triumph of the butterfly. The main difference to notice, though, is how the Buddhist myth sees time as cyclical. Okay? Humanity hits rock bottom, puts its shovel down, okay? But then comes renewal, and a new stage begins. By contrast, in the Christian end times myth, time is an arrow. It goes one way, one direction, clear beginning, clear end. And we also see this time's arrow, okay, in a much older tradition called Zoroastrianism, which scholars say is the original source of the ideas found in the Christian scriptures and also Judaism too. Zoroastrianism. According to Zoroastrianism, the world is a battleground between the army of light and the army of darkness. No one can stay neutral. Now, there is no Switzerland, okay, in this way of looking at the world. Everyone has got to choose a side. And a lot of times, things are going to look really bad for the army of light. It's going to seem, again and again, like they're going to be losing big time. But don't despair. Don't flee to join the other side. There will be one final battle in the end, and the army of light will defeat utterly the army of darkness for good, for all time. And those who choose to fight for the army of light, well, they're going to have their reward. And those who choose to fight for the army of darkness, well, they're going to have their punishment for all eternity. That's how everything ends, according to Zoroastrianism. End of story. Now, I want to pause here for a moment. You know, what we're seeing in three different instances is how world mythology affirms a yearning for total transformation. It's happening in all ages. It's deep in every human heart. Doesn't matter where you grow up, what the age is, all right, what the geography is. And you know, even as the various stories telling it can be different in some ways, the basic underlying theme is the same. It is universal, whether time is cyclical or is an arrow, whatever the heavens and hells and the gods and the monsters involved look like, the underlying theme is just as Dr. King once said. He said, there is something in the soul that cries out for freedom. There is something in the soul that cannot help but express this yearning in big, dramatic symbols. And perhaps this explains the compulsion to pronounce new end-time prophecies and predictions, even though every prediction from the past has been proven wrong. And every time, the world has refused to end. Every time. As the character in Jeanette Winterston's novel, The Stone Gods says, as this character says, history is not a suicide note, it is the record of our survival. And yet, undaunted, new prophets of doom arise. Just more evidence that what is driving things is not so much factual as mythic. I want to run through a brief history of this. The history of Christianity is littered with people trying to crack the code of the book of Revelation and merge their historical moment with that book's storyline. They make solemn predictions. They are never right. The Apostle Paul, okay, the guy who just happened to write most of the New Testament, well, he told fellow Christians to get ready. This was around 49 of the Common Era. The end was going to happen soon. He said over and over and over again, and it didn't. And decades later, someone authoritative wrote in Paul's name so as to do some serious damage control. So in this later biblical book, it's called 2 Thessalonians, the fake Paul wrote this. He wrote, now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our assembling to meet him, we beg you, brethren, not to be quickly shaken in mind or excited, either by spirit or by word or by letter purporting to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord is come. So that's what the fake Paul had to say, doing damage control in the wake of the real Paul's constantly wrong predictions. And guess what? The predictions kept on coming. The gods and monsters within, they will not be denied. So in 1553, Michael Stiefel, a German mathematician, mounted the pulpit in Martin Luther's church to announce his calculation that the end times would begin promptly at 8 a.m. on October 19th, 1533. 200 years later, English preacher George Bell mounted the pulpit to announce his calculation that Jesus Christ would descend from the heaven to earth on February 28th, 1763. Less than 100 years later, American William Miller, founder of the Seventh-day Adventists, you know that group, Seventh-day? Okay. William Miller, founder of the Seventh-day Adventists, he announced that the end would take place on October 22nd, 1844. Y'all see it? This time, all would be different, of course. And you know, it's not just religious people doing the predicting. Secular folks do it also. So, for example, take the British statesman Winston Churchill in 1923. In the shadow of what then was called the war to end all wars, but what we know today as World War I, Churchill wrote an essay entitled, "Shall We Commit Suicide?" Here's what he said. Here's part of what he said. He said, "Certain somber facts emerge solid, inexorable, like shapes of mountains separating from drifting mist. Mankind has never been in this position before. Without having improved appreciably in virtue or enjoying wiser guidance, it has got into its hands for the first time the tools by which it can unfailingly accomplish its own extermination." Churchill here was predicting the invention of war machines that could soon wipe out all life on Earth. This is 1923. "Might not a bomb no bigger than an orange," he said, "be found to possess a secret power to destroy a whole block of buildings? Nay, to concentrate the force of 1,000 tons of cordite and blast a township at a stroke?" Again, Churchill wrote this in 1923, decades before the invention of the atomic bomb. I mean, that's incredible. Today, pessimism about humanity's future is just as dire. It is just as deep. Tyler Austin Harper, he is an assistant professor of environmental studies at Bates College. He says that it is visible everywhere in what has come to be known as the polycrisis. I hope you heard that right, polycrisis. Things seem so screwed up that the word crisis isn't enough. Got to be poly, right? So he goes on to explain. He says climate anxiety is driving new fields in psychology, experimental therapies, and debates about what a recent New Yorker article called the morality of having kids in a burning, drowning world. Our public health infrastructure groans under the weight of a lingering pandemic while we are told to expect only worse contagions to come. The near coup at OpenAI, which resulted in at least in part from a dispute about whether artificial intelligence could soon threaten humanity with extinction. It's only the latest example of our ballooning angst about technology overtaking us. Meanwhile, some experts are warning of imminent population collapse. Elon Musk, who donated $10 million to researchers studying fertility and population decline, called it a much bigger risk to civilization than global warming. Politicians on both sides of the aisle speak openly about the possibility that conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East could spark World War III. That is Tyler Austin Harper. That's the polycrisis. And let me add another layer to the polycrisis. I know no one is thanking me for doing that. This is hard. This is hard, right? But here's the other layer. Do you know why so many evangelical Christians love Donald Trump? Do you know why? Despite the fact that he is the most unchristian person on the planet? Okay, well, come to the sermon chat. We can talk more about this. It's here in the sanctuary. But mean, have you wondered about that? Well, it's because they see him as a very serious player in the conflict between the army of light and the army of darkness. Their reading of the Bible teaches them that in the past, God gave leadership authority to people of shady morals. God used their evil to serve good. So God now has given leadership authority to Donald Trump now. God said a real video posted recently on Truth Social, God had to have someone willing to go into the den of vipers, call out the fake news for their tongues as sharp as a serpent's. The poison of vipers is on their lips, so God made Trump, unquote. And Trump's going to lead the fight against the army of darkness. They sincerely believe that if Trump loses, the country is going to be utterly destroyed. This is the apocalypticism of the right. But you know, the left has its own apocalypticism as well, with its climate anxiety and all the other terrors, including how the left sincerely believes that if Trump wins this election, the country is going to be utterly destroyed. Can I get a little amen for that? But I want to know if I'm making my point clear. That the myth of the end times is alive and well, and it is alive and well on all political sides. And you do not have to identify at all as a religious person for that ancient yet endlessly compelling story from Zoroastrianism to be structuring how you are thinking about things. Army of light versus army of darkness, and all of it. So now I want to turn to the final question before us. When the myth of the end of the world that's hardwired within us, when it gets triggered, and like Winston Churchill, we are writing our own version of the essay, Shall We Commit Suicide? Okay? When we are caught up in that, how can we press pause on our desperation and find a more constructive way of thinking and acting? Okay? Well, first of all, those who see themselves as too enlightened to get caught up in doomsday fantasies, you got to be more humble. You got to be more humble. Today, the same people who might scoff at the true believers who think that the rapture is going to be happening, I don't know, tomorrow or next day, or you saw the picture on the front of your order of service? You saw that? The same people who might scoff at those folks, you know what? They find themselves indulging books like Cormac McCarthy's The Road or Stephen King's The Stand. And so in that first book, an unknown disaster has wiped out most of humanity, and father and son journey through the wastelands of a dying world. In the King novel, a plague sweeps through America, killing almost everyone, leaving only a handful of survivors. Books like these and so many others, books, movies, on and on, television shows, they all have the power to touch us the way they do because the myth lives within and primes us to respond the way we do. That the day after what Scott so ably described, that TV show that first aired November 20th, 1983, it blew me away. I remember that. It blew religious and non-religious alike away. What unites us, whether we are a so-called true believer or not, is our common humanity. We are all capable of feeling the horror of ultimate endings. And we all long for new beginnings too. The fear of the caterpillar, the joy of the butterfly. So here's the second thing now. Second of all, we must never forget that we are dealing with a myth and that we must not literalize it. It is not about the literal, objective world around us. It is about what it is like to be human and to be facing our fears. It's the spiritual struggle of you and me to be beings who are stuck in caterpillar-like structures and are limited And we know that freedom lies in becoming butterflies, but the shock of getting from here to there, the risks, the hard work. But when you see the myth of the end of the world as a literal roadmap, well, I guess one thing I could say is you kind of become like the Millerites, who utterly checked out on their lives. They just checked out. They checked out. What they did was they sold everything they had. And then on the fateful day of October 22nd, 1844, they donned white ascension gowns. And they climbed up to their rooftops. And they waited there for Jesus to take them home. This is a caricature, but that's sort of what it looked like. Do you see that? The white ascension gowns? So the day passed, and then night, and on the new day of October 23rd, 1844, in the wake of Jesus not coming to take them home, they had to face facts. They would have to return to the regular world of here and now. And what was that going to look like, since now they owned nothing? They owned nothing but the white ascension gowns on their backs. That's bad enough. But even worse than that is when the imagery of the army of light versus the army of darkness stirs up such powerful emotions that you enter into that cosmic battle frame of mind. You're going to see yourself as fighting for the army of light, of course, and your conflict with the opposition is going to cease being mere conflict. It's going to become total combat, total warfare, total jihad with that other with whom you disagree. For you see that other as inhuman, as a part of the army of darkness. And there can be no compromise. There can be no quarter. For example, back in this February 22nd, Donald Trump spoke at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville. And it was all about the battle for America's future. And he explicitly identified the enemy as liberals. You guys, who he said are hell-bent on persecuting Christians. As if you can't be Christian and liberal at the same time. Okay? Right? So liberals versus Christians, Christians versus liberals, two warring armies. And there can be no compromise or quarter. What is even more tragic than that is sometimes the enemy needs not be so very different from ourselves. Some liberal activists can seek to assert power over other fellow liberal activists because, in their opinion, they're better. They're pure, they're more aware, they're more virtuous, they've got the perfect vocabulary. So in the end, we have liberal activists demonizing other liberal activists. We have power grabs, we have ego rivalries. The differences between those folks may in truth be negligible, tiny, a tempest in a teapot, but that does not stop the formation of the proverbial circular firing squad from forming. Which also means that all that good energy that could be actually put out into the world doing the real work, it gets squandered. It gets sucked up into this internal strife. People end up disillusioned. It happens in UU churches all the time. It's happened in this church. Church at times becomes the obstacle rather than the vehicle for positive change. I know people who have left West Shore for exactly this reason. The army of light versus the army of darkness logic exploding in our faces. It is distressing. It is terrible. It is the myth of the end times that has possessed us. What I am saying is when that myth possesses us, it can be one of two things. One is to check out. We just stop caring about our world. We just don our ascension gown and wait for Jesus to come take us home. Or we enlist as a soldier in the army of light, and we demonize those with whom we disagree. And you know, it only serves to grease the skids of calamity. Far better to recognize with humility that the end times myth lives within us, and no one is so enlightened that they cannot be triggered, But when it is triggered, we must refrain that energy that's just boiling up in us. We must remember what Dr. King said, something in the soul. There is something in the soul that cries out for freedom. And we must respond to that cry with redoubled efforts in this world. Yeah, watch the day after and then make the world a different place so that doesn't happen. Right? Watch the world. We should watch that movie again. My God. We should make Putin watch that movie. We refuse to check out of our lives. We refuse to give up and indulge in apathy. We refuse to go the opposite extreme and do the whole army of light versus army of darkness thing. We show up with others. We do the work we're called to do. We don't let perfection become the enemy of the good, and then we step back and we let go of results. Finally, there's this third thing. The third thing to do when the end of the world myth has been triggered in us and you're feeling that boiling energy, it is this. We must never forget how generations past thought that they were going to be the last. Whatever the challenges of their day, they saw the ugliness and they saw the threats and they concluded, we are in the last days. This is it. This is the moment. Ours is just not unique among all the generations that came before. We need to stop indulging ourselves by thinking that our forefathers and foremothers never felt the oncoming rush of disaster and ruin as we do today. It's different. And it's not so different after all. Over and over again, they felt this oncoming rush. Yet the human species has persisted every time. Again, it is what the character in Jeanette Winterston's novel, The Stone Gods, says. History is not a suicide note. It is the record of our survival. So we need to stop burdening the challenges, the incredibly significant challenges, our polycrisis challenges of this time. We need to unburden that with the additional weight of end-of-the-world fears. We have to stop freaking ourselves out. I really, really want you to remember what I am saying. Come the presidential election this November 5th, remember, whatever happens, let's stay focused. Let us stay patient. Let us keep calm and carry on. We got to keep bending that arc, that moral arc of the universe towards justice. We have to remember life is a marathon, not a sprint. Are you with me? Yes. That's not enough of you. Come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Let's say our closing words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. Are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard. So I'm going to say something, and every time I say something, I want you to call back with wo-ya-ya. Got it? Gaza. Wo-ya-ya. A woman's right to choose. A presidential election coming up. Climate crisis. 91 criminal charges against 5 indictments. We could go on all day. I'm saying something. In fact, you probably got all sorts of stuff you could say. I'll say wo-ya-ya back to you. Ukraine. Wo-ya-ya. What else? What else? Education. Wo-ya-ya. What else? Gerrymandering. Wo-ya-ya. What else? What? One at a time. What? Go. Small arsenals. Wo-ya-ya. Fentanyl. Wo-ya-ya. What else? What? Trans rights. Wo-ya-ya. Again and again. The main thing I want you to take with you from our service today is a new mantra. Wo-ya-ya. You're reading the paper, and one part of the poly crisis just reaches out and punches you on the nose. Wo-ya-ya. Wo-ya-ya. We are going. Heaven knows where we're going, but we know within, and we're going to get there. Heaven knows how we're going to get there, but we know we will. It's going to be hard, we know. The road's going to be muddy and rough, but we're going to get there. Heaven knows we're going to get there, but we know we will. Wo-ya-ya to you. Wo-ya-ya to you. Amen. Go in peace.